Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu today presents the country's budget for 2024. That was the first in his new administration, which started exactly 6 months ago today. The president says the new year budget proposal rests on 7 pillars of national defense, job creation, macroeconomic stability, investment environment optimization, human capital development, and social security. Now, joining me to dig into some key statistics of Tinubu's first budget and outlook is Bongo. Bongo is a professor of economics at the Lagos Business School. We thank you, Professor, for coming in tonight to crunch the budget proposal for me. Good evening. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, boss, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I just want to, a few seconds, to bring this up on the screen for our viewers to see. And that's first the 7 priority areas which Mr. President spoke about, and I just mentioned them in my intro just a few seconds ago. If you just put that up for me from the production team, that's the 7 priority areas: national defense, job creation, poverty reduction, macroeconomic stability, investment environment optimization, human capital development, and social security. So, Mr. Professor Adi, what do you make of these 7 priority areas that President Tinubu identified in his first budget? Talk to me.
Yeah, so I think those represent the pain points in the economy right now. So you have a very high poverty level. But again, the poverty of the people is itself, coming from the poverty of the economy. So we have an economy that has depressed 8 years ago, 2015 precisely. We had an economy that was $500 billion, and then now our economy is about $378 billion. So we've lost almost 200 billion over the past 8 years. So that also means that per capita income, which used to be $2,500 or thereabout, has also dropped by even more than half. So people now live, per capita on less than $1,000, So, so poverty of the people is itself a reflection of the poverty of the economy. So total output has dropped. And we know the reason why total output has dropped. Same thing, infrastructure, which is the thing that powers industrial outputs in Nigeria, has also gone down. So the stock of infrastructure that used to be about 30% of the GDP in 2012 is today less than 15% of the GDP. So whatever plans you make to boost outputs, to create jobs, or to reduce unemployment, poverty, and social security and defense, without grappling at the real issues that will aid productivity, will not really help much. So again, a lot of people have spoken about the size of the budget. So I also saw some of the things you shared earlier regarding the relative size of our budgets, to other countries in Africa.
Yes.
We seem to be the lowest. And then if we look at our budget, consider our budget in real terms.
Professor Adi, we'll get in just a minute to the statistics in terms of crunching the numbers. We're just trying to look at the headlines. This looks like a 7-point agenda, and I'm trying to find out from you, what is new on this 7-point agenda that you can see on the screen? Defense, macroeconomic stability, social security, human capital development. What's new, really?
Well, I don't think there's anything new there. You remember Yar'Adua, his 7-point agenda. Remember Jonathan, I think at a point it was extended to 8 points.
Yes.
So it's still the same old story. So nothing has changed. But like I said, the basic problems of Nigerians remain the same. Because those challenges, even going back to 1980, so the problems that bedevil the country still remain the same.
Hasn't changed. So these 7 items remain a whole lot. Maybe defense and national security seems to have gone up a little bit more in in the last 10 years or so. But let's crunch the numbers, Situa. You're a professor of economics. I'm sure you want to crunch the numbers, look at the devils in the details, and we're bringing this up for you to see on your screen. Headline figure is about 27.5 trillion. I'm sure you're trying to allude to the size of the budget. budget for countries like such as South Africa. But again, depending on what you are looking at, the efficiency of the system and where the economy is more on the public civil service side, on the private sector side, you can take a look at the headline budget. The non-recurrent figure, 9.2 trillion, debt servicing. I saw that the deficit to the GDP will be brought down to 3.88% against last year's this year's 6.11 budget with a GDP target of 3.76%. And then you go down the rest of what the capex will look like, debt servicing and all that. Put all of this together in a box and squeeze it for me.
So, Boston, there isn't much to talk about the budget. I think we need to dwell on the size. Okay, let me break down the national economy for you. The national output, that's the GDP, is about $379 billion currently. So out of that, consumption is 60%. Investment is just a paltry 9%. So our economy is just that of consumption. And the net export, the external sector, is about 21 or 22%. Then you have the real catalyst for the investment sector, which is the government sector. That represents 4%, even though it's small in terms of its contribution to GDP. But government budget is instrumental to catalyzing investment. There are 5 objectives to fiscal policy. The first one is output growth, output expansion, employment or job creation, social welfare, inequality, and distribution of income, and then you have deficit management and investment boosting. So when you look at all of this, and then relative to what the budget can achieve, so you can see that the numbers are too small, given the size of our economy. Now, in the past, I'd argued, I've written about it, in an article I published in the Business Day some years back, that if so big, why so small? So this is a country of 200 million people, and then you have a budget that in real terms, if you really break it down with the exchange rates of the naira today to the dollar, that budget is about $23 billion.
USD, yes.
So which is less than budget of 2022. Last 2023 budget, which is actually 27 billion. So you see that our budget in real terms is less than last year. And then we now have this ambitious target to actually go beyond what was achieved last year. But actually, the problem of budget in Nigeria is not the numbers, not the figures, but it's about implementation. There has never been a time we managed to achieve an implementation rate of more than 25%. So if we can actually build the mechanisms to improve,
we need to increase the size of the budget, Professor Bongo. We need to increase the size of the budget. What makes that impossible for us to do or difficult? Do you know why?
Yeah, so that's I don't know. So the question is for you and I. So that's the question I've been asking for so many years. We need to increase the size of budget, but let's forget about the size right now or increasing the size. Let's talk about budget fungibility, which is the conversion rate of the budget. It's not 1-to-1. So what we get out of every 1 naira that we spend is about 25 kobo. Okay, so that means 75 kobo is lost completely. And now,
where does the 75 kobo go?
To increase.
Where does the 75 kobo of that 1 naira go? I want to talk to the man on the street. Where does it go?
Corruption, of course, overinflation of contracts and all of that. So that is where it goes. Now, what we need to do to improve the effectiveness of the budget is to look at the mechanism for the delivery of public services. Look at the mechanism.
Mr. President spoke about that today. Respectfully, Professor, the President spoke about that today. We'll get to that in this conversation. I just want us to very quickly move on to the parameters for this budget in terms of the exchange rate, in terms of the inflation target, in terms of the daily oil output and oil price targets, those forecasts and, that formed the budget proposal, do you think these figures are in order and they're just coming up? If you mush that down, you have the GDP target of 3.76%. That's above the global average. That's what Mr. President said in his presentation. Inflation 21.4 for next year. Exchange rate 750 naira to the dollar. We're around 1,000 as we speak on the street. Oil price at 77.896. Today we're doing about 62 to the in the benchmark. So, and the daily output for oil is about 1.78. Do you agree with these parameters?
Yes, I do agree with that. But let's talk about growth. Growth of 3.7 says can be achieved without the government. So supposing that we run an economy that doesn't have a government, like Somalia or some other countries, we can still achieve that. When you have 60% of your total output, because when you talk about the growth rate, it is the growth rate of total output, isn't it? And I've just told you that in our output, consumption is 60%. So if people just eat only, the economy will grow. So that isn't much. So if he has said that the economy will grow to 5%, then I would say, okay, I'll take him seriously. But economy can grow with or without government because we consume a lot. So let's forget about that. Oil price, yes, oil is trending above 80. So, and some JP Morgan actually predicted that, in the course of 2024, we may actually have oil as high as $120 per barrel. Given the geopolitics of today, that is possible. Now, I think oil production volume is a low-hanging fruit, and that's what I thought that the government would prioritize. So 1.7 million barrels per day is insufficient. We should aim towards having 2 million barrels per day, because that's what will cushion the deficit. And as long as government is borrowing, as long as we have that kind of deficit, there is no way that you will rein in inflation. So the inflation expectation that they're talking about is unachievable. So given that the deficit and where we are today with inflation, actually the actual inflation, depending on who you listen to, is above 30%, even though NBC is reporting 27%. So the president is projecting 24%. I don't see how that will happen, how that will come about, given that we are still going to borrow more, and then we have this deficit. So the cumulative deficit of the years will mean that in 2024, you cannot expect inflation to go down. It's not possible. And then look at the money supply as well. So money supply has grown.
Yeah, the deficit.
Yeah, money supply has grown
the deficit financing.
In the past 10 months.
The deficit financing, which Mr. President outlined, that's his proposal, by the way. It says there will be new borrowings, 7.83 trillion. We're going to have privatization proceeds. That's roughly 300 billion. That's his proposal to the National Assembly, and the drawdowns on our multilateral and bilateral funds. That will be 1.095 trillion naira. Okay, there you got it on the screen. So you think with this money, you think we are home and dry for next year? No,
we are not. I'm talking about the impact of the deficit on the economy, which is inflation. And then once you talk about inflation, the next thing is exchange rate. And then once you talk about, interest rates, and then you bring in exchange rate. So when you have all those things going up, inflation will be high. So with high inflation, so purchasing power and aggregate demand will be depressed. So that will also have impact on the growth target that the government is projecting for. So, there are some inescapable issues with the budget, given where we are. So no matter what the president does, no matter what they do, we will still be there with inflation. So inflation can only begin to go down by 2025. But the best thing that can happen is if the president declares a state of emergency in the oil sectors to boost production, the volume of oil export, because that's our lowest hanging fruit. Every other thing will take a longer time, but we need something to really bridge the deficit that we have today. So if we can reduce the deficit, that's the only thing that will bring down inflation. And once inflation comes down, then we can now begin to somehow have some good expectations about the economy. The whole idea of privatization, public-private partnership, see, when you bring in the private sector, hand over infrastructure to them to build, they have to raise funds. And where do they get the funds? The Nigerian banks do not have capacity to fund big-ticket projects. So they need to approach the international financial institutions for that. And then who's going to lend them money with the risk profile of Nigeria today? So the perceived risk means that the interest rates on any funds they're going to raise abroad will be very high. And then that will also increase, the viability level for the project. And then with that, we now have issues with affordability. And then if you have projects delivered that are not affordable to the people, that is a recipe for social unrest as well. So either way, I think government has a lot of responsibility and need to be deliberate and careful in structuring its budget spending, rather than all these pro-market reforms.
Oh, great. So you said, Professor Adi, that we should just play that a little bit on the sides. Let's focus on the expectations on how to improve the effectiveness of the federal budget that President Tinubu spoke about today. Mr. President spoke about the need to improve the effectiveness of the budget. He asked the National Assembly to ensure that the projects and programs that are equitable benefits are included in the budget for next year. He said only projects and programs that are in line with the sectoral mandates of NDAs and those that are capable of realizing the vision of our administration should be included in the budget. So what do you make of this?
I don't think that is sufficient because, that's been the same, fashion. It's something that we've done over the years. Nothing has changed from what Mr. President has said. I was looking, I was expecting to hear maybe a new framework, a new mechanism that will involve some element of the academia, the think tanks, and the civil society. Somehow superintending the budget implementation. So that is something that we need to just think out of the box. But if it is going to be the ministries handling their budget, we still get the same thing. Even I know some people within the government who do not believe that the budget that we have can be properly executed, even in the current dispensation. So that's the challenge. We haven't changed that mechanism. Until we change it, we cannot expect to see any different results.
But we need different results, Professor Adi. How do we get it? What do you think we can still do at this point in time, or as a parting shot from you? Well, I think the lowest hanging fruit for the president today is to find ways to reduce the deficit. The spending on government, the apparatus of government, is quite high. I think the president also needs to, they need to do a soul search. That has to reduce, let's reduce expenditure, okay? Cut down spending, that is very important. Not spending on social welfare, not spending on public infrastructure, but spending on the apparatus of governance. If that could reduce, I'm sure that we will have, we will reduce that deficit. Then secondly, I keep talking about it. Think of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Aramco is today the world's most valuable and the most capitalized firm today. So what have they done? Over the years, they didn't talk of market reforms or building this or investing in this and that. They just concentrated on one thing, which is their oil. So they knew what they did. They focused deliberately, optimized and utilized the oil resources that they have. Today, they are now playing in every field, whether it's entertainment or football and whatever. So that is something, the strategy I thought that the president would deploy. Yes. We have one major resource today, regardless of what anybody says, is still oil and gas. So we need to prioritize that sector. We need to increase the volume of oil. We need to be ambitious there. Get it up to 2 billion. By the way, in the past 2 years, there has not been any fresh investment in oil and gas sector, and that is our most prized possession right now. And I don't see how we can expand on other sectors without that. So what we need to do for the president to do today is to declare a state of emergency. Oil theft in the Niger Delta or whatever needs to stop. Our oil volume needs to increase to 2 million barrels per day. With that, think of the additional funding that government will do, we get, and the deficit will just disappear. And with that, inflation will come to manageable levels. And then investment will now begin to come. So thank you so much for your time on the show tonight. This is a Coaching Razor conversation. We appreciate those insights into the new budget proposal. Have a great evening, Professor Bongo Adi of the Lagos Business School. Thank you so much.